All right. Hey, Leandra, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I'm excited and a little nervous about this conversation.
Oh no. Uh-oh.
So, and I only say nervous because I'll have to tell you, even as a younger woman, I was not a fan of dating before I got
Yeah.
married and all of those things. It just was not one of my favorite activities. And so I don't say I'm afraid of the conversation. I'm just interested to hear how this is going to all sound. And maybe, I mean, I've got a husband. I'm not out there looking or anything,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
hope this helps open up some channels for some people out there. So, why don't you give us a
Yeah.
little background about yourself and how you landed on coaching people about dating?
Yeah. Well, I am Leandra Frey. I'm a life and dating coach, and it didn't come all at once. It was a bit of a journey, but mostly where the desire and the passion to get into the dating world and helping women and sometimes men is when I went through my divorce, my first divorce, where I was still my first, hopefully my only, my first marriage. Let's say that my first marriage. Yeah, I was still really was in love with my husband. So it was really hard when we went through that divorce. I just was not prepared and having to go be on the other side of it. Back in the dating world, just like you, I didn't want to be there. I didn't like it the first round. I mean, it was okay the first round, but you're looking, at that time in your 20s, you're just looking and looking and looking and hoping and praying. And then I was like, I'm here again. Oh no. And so and then with a crushed heart, like so, I was pretty
Yeah,
crushed. So I was dealing with, what happens after a divorce. I think regardless, if you were the initiator or the receiver end, there's still a loss of what the
sure,
future you thought the future was going to be. And so,
sure.
just coming from that self-worth perspective, I just was like, oh man, this is tough. And at the time I thought I was really old to be dating. I was 31 and
I
I
was gonna
just,
say, how old were you?
right. And I was like, man, everyone's married. And at the time it felt like everyone was having babies, but
Sure.
just, and so I just was like, oh, but anyway, so going through that process of having to get my belief in myself again, healing my heart and realizing that jumping into another um, relationship wasn't going to help my heartbreak. That was probably the big one because usually people will jump from relationship to relationship so you don't have to deal with the sadness, the disappointment, you just, all the heartbreak. You're just like, well, when
Right.
I meet another person, I'll be in love again and it'll be fine. Obviously, that's not what happened. But yeah, I was figuring that out, and then I really started dating, and just without intention. Like I was still looking for how can this person serve me, or how can they complete my heart, right? Like I was still struggling, so it was very, I think it was very not terrible. It wasn't like I was having a bad dating. It wasn't like terrible things were
Yeah.
happening to me. That's not the world I come from, but you still have to go through the process. And I finally went to, in the process, I was doing a lot of transformational work, like personal development. When you go through something like that, you're like, I need to go work on myself and all the things. So I went to this 4-day training by an organization called Gap Community, which is still in play today. They're still very active. And that was the first time that I probably saw life coaching or mindset coaching or transformational coaching, where you can really hear what your limiting beliefs were, and like
Sure.
immediately how you can frame them. And it's been around since, for not Gap Community, but that thought. But it was the first time I'd seen
Right.
it. Especially like coming from the corporate world. I grew up like, do great, do good in school, go get a good corporate job. We're not going to talk about emotions or any of those things. So I was
Let's
like,
just
what
go
is
to work,
happening?
make a living, and go be a good citizen.
Yeah. And what do you mean have difficult conversations and be intentional? What is that? Anyway, so it was the first time I'd seen probably any type of work around that. And so at the time, I had a boyfriend going into the training. I had a good job. Everything was going really well. But since it was the first time I'd seen just your power of your thoughts really give you your results, and just watching people transform around me. Like there was a couple there that started on the first day. They didn't even like each other. I mean, they were just so closed off from each other. They were like on the edge of a divorce. I mean, there was all this drama, but by day 4, I mean, you would have thought they were honeymooners. I was like, what is happening?
Wow.
Anyway,
Does that
what happened
happen?
for me was, yeah, it was pretty amazing. But what happened for me, you know, didn't happen right away, but it was the self-limiting, the limiting belief that I was called out on was you're self-sufficient. Like, you think you're self-sufficient. Well, that sounds great in today's world, right? I'm like, of course I'm
Sure.
self-sufficient. I just went through a divorce. I got to figure it out, go save my life, be independent, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't realize how it was hindering. Yeah, like be all the things. And I didn't
Yeah.
realize how much it was hindering me from deeper relationships, not just with romance. It was hindering my relationship with my family, with my work, right? I just stayed at surface
Because you don't need,
level
I'm
where,
fine. I can do it
exactly.
myself. I got a divorce.
Yeah.
I've got a good job. I'm still feeding myself, paying my rent. I'm going, I'm dating, I'm doing this. See, I got it all
Yep.
together.
Yep. Yeah. And that was the attitude of heart. That I was just like, I don't need anyone. I mean, yeah, I have a boyfriend, but it was like, whatever. And that's how I treated everyone. And so I was, you know, I didn't really think about it in that moment, but like within about 6 months, I mean, my whole life changed from there. Like just how I treated people, how I deepened. Just I got really close with my brother. He like it was so funny. He tells me later. He told me this years later because I started calling him up. Like he's 12 years older than me, and so we didn't have much of a relationship growing up because he was older. But he was always this far off guy. You know, I only cared about his kids. But I just remember coming from that trainer. I was like, I really want to get to know my brother, and so I started calling him every week. And anyway, now we're super close. But they told me, him and his wife told me one day, they're like, yeah, when you started calling every week and talking to him, and sometimes sometimes my brother would answer, sometimes he wouldn't. He was like, they thought I was dying. They thought like, they were like,
Like there's like
who
really
does this? Like
something
someone that's
wrong.
right. That's how dramatic the change was. They were
Wow.
like, you were so
Wow, that's
consistent. You were
big.
so interested. Yeah. Yeah, it was, and they didn't tell me that right away. I knew my brother was kind of like, he would pick up the phone and be like, what? Like, who is this? What do you want? You want to know about me? Right? I didn't go and talk
That's
about him.
funny.
I didn't go and
That's
talk about
funny.
myself. I wanted to know about what's going on with him. But yeah, so that whole, so just coming from that training, that was probably the most tangible relationship that transformed. And then from there, my dating just went on fire. Like it changed how I treated men. Like I was all about how could I make, even if I'm only going to know you for 2 hours of my life, how can I pour into you that you just are so like left disarmed, right? You're just like, I'm in love with you right now. Not that I was going romantically, but just more, I just want to treat you like a human being because in the dating space, no one is treating each other very well, and especially on the online dating. And I was online dating, right? And so, but yeah, so eventually, you know, with that attitude of heart, I did get engaged with someone, and we did not end up lasting very long because even though we have the same values, and you'll hear me talk about values when you're working together, you know, when you're looking at dating, what we had messed up on was like, do we want the same things in life? Not necessarily values, but the same life vision. I'm very close to my family, and he is not very close to his, but he didn't want to do the whole like family, like always hanging out on family vacations, and like we just couldn't see a way out of that. Like I wanted to move back to, at the time I was living around outside of Washington, D.C. I wanted to move back to Texas. So we didn't have like things for the long term. Like we're, you know, if we were going to have kids, I wanted to have kids near our families. He was like, no, what's that about? So anyway, so it wasn't anything
That's
negative.
a big,
It
that's a
wasn't like
big, well, and that's a big change.
yeah,
That's a big
but it's a
difference. I mean,
huge, but when you're dating, I think part of it is like people are not willing to have those conversations, right? So that
right.
was one of the things I learned that we probably earlier on before engagement, we probably should have talked about like what that looked like. But I think at the time I was just so happy to be engaged, right? I was like, oh my God, someone wants me again, you know, and he was a good guy. And, but we ended up ending because we didn't align on the same vision, right? What we wanted. So it was an amicable breakup. It still sucked, but the cool thing was because I had changed my mindset so much about dating, it didn't deter. It wasn't like, oh, I have another broken heart again. It's going to take me forever. And I remember I was talking to my pastor, and he said, "Oh man, Leandra, this is going to take you a year to get over." And I remember thinking, oh, I don't think so. Like, I didn't say that to him, but I was like, okay,
Yeah, like,
yeah. Because at that moment I knew with the right mindset, which I had already done, like that's how I got engaged, with the right mindset, treating people well, knowing what your values are, knowing what my vision now is, like, make sure I need to be clear with the next person. Then it wouldn't be, I don't think it'll be a problem again. And so then, I like that summer, because it was the end of that summer, like it was the end of that spring. It was like Labor Day or Memorial Day. I got back into the dating scene. This was like a few weeks after the breakup, and just recreated my process just like I had done, and found my husband 3 months later, and we were engaged less than a year later. Not engaged, married less than a year later. So just because at that moment it was a lot easier. I knew what I was looking for. Not that I didn't know. Remember, the first guy I was engaged to, it wasn't that he wasn't not the, again, he was the right guy. We just didn't have the same thing that we wanted in our life. And then when I found my husband, he was really close to his family. He was willing to be close to my family. We had those conversations within probably the first 3 months, so that took us in a better trajectory.
Sure. Well, when you have that
yeah.
right away, then it's not
Yeah.
6 months, 8 months later, you go, oh, you don't like your family? you know?
Yeah, yeah. And some people say that. Like, some people will say, like, I don't get along with my family on the first date, first or second date. But we just don't think about it. We're like, well, they were abused or trauma or whatever. We're willing to negotiate around it, and that's fine. But like, if they don't like their family so much that they're not willing to be with your family, right? Then, someone are like, no, we're going to do this. There's some people that are like, it's just me and you, babe, me and you to the end. And the reality is we're communities. Our families are our
Yeah.
communities, And so, my husband, Dale, he's really close with he's really close to his parents. He would see them every week. Up until we moved back to Texas. He came to Texas. So that was a little hard, because we were moving from the DC area to Texas when we got married. And then now his family's in Boston, but we talk every week, with his family. They just came and visited us. And, but yeah, so, and he went through, was speaking of dating him, he was dating too. I met him at a speed dating event, and that's how I met him. So I'm not all about online dating. Like, I've done online dating. That's how I met my ex-fiance. I've done, meeting people at church, meeting people at meetup. I've done it all, and there's a process and a mindset. The biggest one is the mindset, like how you treat them, even if it's for 2 hours or you're only going to be with them for 3 dates. You want to make it their best 3 dates, no matter how they may not be receiving you the same way that you're receiving them. But I always tell the people I work with, I'm like, it's incumbent on you to bring the warmth and enthusiasm and love to the date. Right? Because you need to help them feel comfortable so that they open up, so that you know what they're about. Because if they're nervous and you're just sitting there like, why aren't you asking me questions? Which I get a lot of that. Why aren't you asking me questions? I'm like, okay, if they want to talk about themselves, let them talk about themselves. At least you're getting the information you need, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, so after I went through that whole thing, I was already with that organization that I'm in, Gap Community. I had gotten really involved with, personal development. So I knew I was on a contract at my company. I was on a government contract. It was a weird government contract, but it was a government program that I knew was going to end. Like, it was supposed to last 3 to 5 years. It lasted 13. So I knew I was going to segue, right? Yeah. So I knew at some point I was going to make a transition to leave corporate and go into life coaching or personal development. I knew I was going to move there in that direction probably once, especially I was able to plan it out. So then, because I knew it was at some point
Right.
we were going to end. I didn't know it was going to last 13 years, but I was thinking like maybe 10. And so by that time, I was already getting the training, the certifications. Like, I want to be a life coach. And so I got into relationship coaching when I got my certification back in 21. And I mean, by that time, I had done a lot of work with Gap community at my work, just like listening to people, right? Like with how their lives were changing. I wasn't doing any coaching. I was just in the rooms, just listening. And then I did, a leadership course with them. And then I got my life coach certification through another organization called the Life Coach School. And then I just stayed in it. And so I did relationship coaching, but my heart was for the women that had given up or had gone through a divorce. And for a long time, I was like, oh, I'm helping women after a divorce. But then I realized that it's women that have just given up. And it's not necessarily because women right after a divorce, they're usually rearing to go, like they're ready to meet the next person because they're just like, I'm so sick of my
Of that
ex-husband.
one?
Yeah. There's a bunch that are like, I'm already dating, I'm already on the apps, we're separated, but I'm already on the apps. But I knew there was a bunch of women that had maybe been divorced many years or never got a chance to get married because they had their kids young, or they just never got around to dating and then just gave up. And I realized there was this huge pocket of women and men, but mostly women, that had been 20 years since they had been in the dating world. Because if they were a single mom in their 20s, never got a chance to get married, right? Then they raised their kids for 19, 20 years, and then they find themselves like, oh, I'm not, all my energy's
The
not,
kids are,
they're no longer
yeah,
as,
talk about an empty
yeah.
nest, right?
Yeah, they're a total empty nest. They've never been married. They never even had a co-parent, right? Because they were single moms from the get-go. There was never a divorce. So that's a whole set of women that are like, okay, like it's like they woke up. It's like hilarious and the best thing ever. But they're like baby gazelles, And I'm like, okay, like let's steer you in the right way so that we don't end up, repeating past mistakes. And then my widows, usually. My widows that I work with, they obviously haven't been in the dating world in 20 or 30 years, just because they were happily married. And so I tend to work with them too, but mostly just to navigate this new online dating world, just to help them get started. Most of the time because they had a great marriage. They're coming from great marriages. They know that love is possible. So it's really cool to watch them navigate the dating world with a little bit, their heart is a little bit more open, even though they're still grieving. And usually I don't start working with a widow. Usually it's about 2 or 3 years after they've lost their husband is usually when they come to me. I mean, no one's coming like right after their husband has passed, but it's a few years where they're like, I think I'm ready, and I'm like, okay, well, here's the process. Here's what you need to think. You're not in your 20s anymore. But just because your hormones aren't working for you as they did in our 20s with the look across the room, your heart and mind are better, or it's at work right now, and they're even better than your hormones. So I'm like,
Well,
you gotta like,
more rational decisions here, right?
yeah,
So let's talk about
yeah,
that a little bit, right?
yeah,
Because, you know, whether, like you said, by choice, circumstance, divorce, death, whatever, now you're 60 plus and you find yourself single. And
hmm
some people are like, overdone, don't care. But there are other people, like you said, that are still like looking for that companionship, that relationship, that partnership. And if they've been out of the dating world for whatever reason, how, I mean, it's different. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I don't know that if something, and I'm not putting this in the universe, but if I found
no, it's
myself
okay.
single again,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do. I would probably just be just fine, quite frankly. But um but how does one do that, right? So how does one, if they are in that place that says, I want to meet someone. I don't know if I want to get married, but I want to meet
Yeah,
someone
yeah.
that I can have a relationship with, that I have companionship. What the hell do I do?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And the first thing I usually ask people when they start working with me, or if they're still thinking about, they're like, I'm not really sure. Like, I get people that come to my events, they're like, I think I want to date. And right, whatever circumstance. Sometimes if someone's been divorced for a long time, they were raising their kids in a co-parenting way, or they were raising grandkids. But I asked them why, right? Like, why do you want to be? What is it that you're looking for in a companionship, right? Because a lot of women, especially in their 60s, right, have, even if they're done raising their grandkids or their kids, their life is full, right?
Right.
Their life is full. They've, at this point in their life, they're no longer people pleasers, as we talked about last night. They're no longer people pleasing,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are living their best life. Like, they're already living their best life. So I usually tell them, and I'll tell this, is that the person that if you're looking for a person, you're looking for them to add to your life, like complement your life as it is, right? Not taking
Right.
away, but they're going to add, they're literally the icing on the cake, whoever you bring
So like
into your life.
that extra dimension that you're looking for.
Yeah,
Just it's
yeah.
not.
And
Yeah.
yeah, you already have, I'm like, keep in mind, we're not looking for love to be completed. We're looking for love to be witness to someone else's life, and they're going to be witness to you. And there is something about when you have someone in front of you that you're loving, right? When you are in a space where it's not, you wake up by yourself. And I was single for a long time, right? So, I had a pretty good life, right? Before I got married. I'm like, I'm having coffee on the patio. It's nice. I'm with my cats. Like, things are good, but it's a lot different when I'm like, I could bring coffee to my husband or ask him how he did, when my energy is directed to witnessing another human being's highs, their lows, maybe if they love me back. I mean, we're looking for someone to love us back, but really what love, like when we get into a relationship, is really about how we can love them, right? I mean, it's really about how we can make their day, how we can serve them. Yes, we want it to be reciprocated, but if you go in with that mindset where you're like, man, I like bringing him food. I'm not saying cooking, but I don't cook much. I procure it from a really cool place called Dinners by Delane. But I'm like, I go get it, or I select the menu or whatever. So,
Right. Right.
but I'm like, my husband doesn't like shopping very much at all. So I do like ordering him stuff. Like, hey, I got you yesterday. Ordered a pair of pants and I got the wrong size. He's like, I'm not so small. I was like, oh. Anyway, that's like, yeah. Oops. I was like, but anyway, but things like that.
Better
Right?
too small than too large. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Better too small than too large.
So yeah, but yeah. So those are the things. Like, it's not about like, oh, I'm fine by myself. I mean, being in a relationship is about loving someone else, right? It's like the people
Yeah.
that live long on this earth, right? If you ever look at the blue zones,
Right.
one of the things that they're in, one of the factors is they're in community, right? Or they're in these long-term marriages, but they're in villages. They're around family and friends, and a lot of them have pets. Right? So like if we think about all the animals we have, I have 2 dogs and 2 cats, is that if you're going to have a bad day, like you still have to feed those animals. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some bad days, like bad days. I mean, granted now I have my husband that if I'm having a bad day, I'm like, can you take the dogs out or feed them? But if you have an animal that's dependent on you, you know what I mean? And that's one of the elements
Yeah.
of the blue zones is owning an animal. But they're all combined to having those like content lives and living long, right? Because with marriage or being in partnership, you'll hear me talk about marriage more than just long-term partnership, is that, I mean, there's I don't know, there's so many benefits to it. Having someone, have your back when you're, especially in your 60s. We have our older parents that are probably in the 90s at this point, right? So we have parents that were, having to go back and forth. We're going through death. We're going through illness. Maybe we're healthy, but like we have a sister that's, getting sick. Like there's just so much to it when you're with someone else. So when you're looking at, so those are the questions like I'll ask, like, have you thought about this? Obviously I have my spin on it, but I'm going to hear it from like, what is it that you're actually looking for? And then when they start, I have to ask like what their personality is, because some people, like the dating apps are very stressful. Especially like there can be fun. I can teach you how to
I
make it
met my
have fun.
husband on an app. I did meet him online,
Yeah, they work.
and
They work.
They work. You just
Yeah,
have to have a system. You have to
yeah.
have,
You have to have a
you know,
system. Yeah,
we talk about boundaries, right? And what are your, I used to call it guppy dating because we're all in a big tank. We're all a bunch of guppies in these online apps.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
we jump into the little fishbowl, and the first date is really the guppy date. It's not really a
yeah,
first date. It's the
yeah,
guppy date where you decide if you actually want to go on a date.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then if you don't, then you both jump back into the guppy pond and go find another guppy to go see on a guppy date with.
yeah. Oh
Because
yeah,
you go on these things and, and like you said, what are you looking for? What do you want? What's important? And
yeah,
just trying to get through some of those first steps
yeah. I love
of
the
do I
name.
even want to go spend
Yeah,
spend
I
two
love.
hours with you and actually have a meal? I don't know.
Yeah, I love the name Guppy Date. I'm going to borrow that from you because I do tell the people that go online dating. I was like, I want them because a lot of women, especially, we're no longer in our 20s and we're dating in our
Right.
60s, 50s or 60s, and we're still expecting the same spark from when we're in our 20s. I'm like, it does not work that way. And so
Yeah.
I usually tell them like, you need to go on a second date with the same person. But they were like, but it
Yeah.
was so boring. It was so mundane. It was so blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I don't care. Just you're going on a second date. And so with
Yeah.
the same person,
Be-
unless
yeah,
they
because that
treating you.
guppy date is like you're at the party and you're having the conversation because you've
Yeah.
just met them. So
Yeah.
it's the initial meeting where, like I said, you're looking at the the first date at the buffet or at the bar or at the party or at the networking event or
Yeah.
whatever it is that you met them. That's the online part. So, I mean, that first date is just seeing if you actually want to have conversation with them.
Yeah. And sorry if I'm walking around. When I moved locations, my battery went dead.
Oh,
so,
okay.
so give me. I'm just
That's
doing a
fair.
plug. I'm
You're
getting a
fine.
plug. But totally agree. And I'm gonna. If you see me on my next social media post, say Guppy Date, I'm gonna be like, listen to your podcast because that is a great. That's a great analogy for what's happening. So, but yeah, I usually say, because we're still expecting what you just said, that look across the room, that whole thing where we're like,
Yeah.
it should feel like we should feel the hormones or we should feel the whatever. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, that's not how it works, not at the age. And you have to have a conversation, and a lot of people are nervous. So they talk a lot,
And
especially young
it's
men.
like difficult conversations, right? So what's important to you?
Yeah.
You know, at first it was I didn't want to date anybody with children because I didn't
Yep.
have children and I didn't want that. Well, I ended up marrying someone with two kids.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
but when you can have boundaries and yet maybe they shouldn't be strict,
Yeah.
right? If I'd have said I'm not dating anyone with kids, I never would have met Chris.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think there's standards, there's thinking about it, there's things that you want or don't want, but understand that I think sometimes you get there they move a little bit. I don't know the right words I'm trying to
No, and
come
I
up
go
with.
through a whole process. And excuse me, moving around. I just want to make sure we're not in a space where people are probably like, "What are you doing?" But I'm like, the conference room which I originally reserved, it had that echoey space, and now I'm
Oh.
like, now I'm like outside. But usually I go through a process with my clients, and I hold workshops on it. But it's like knowing your values, right? Like, what are you looking for? How to narrow that down, and then non-negotiables. Not necessarily red flags, non-negotiables. One of them is children. That shows
Yeah,
up.
right.
And I make them list like 3 or 4 non-negotiables. And then really, what is the number one that you will not deal with, right?
And what is
And
that usually? So what do you find
it
is
can
like the
be,
number one
It can be
non-negotiable?
different every time. I'm mostly, it can be different every time, but I take them through a whole process where they have to really look at it because they might miss out on some great guys, like similar to you, speaking of like, I didn't want to date anyone with kids where, they weren't willing to do that. Sometimes it's, the biggest one is either non-religion or a believer, either like you're
Yeah,
looking for
that's going to
someone that's
be, yeah.
yeah, but sometimes people get, and this has happened to me even when I dated, because you're just so happy to be dating, right? Not that you're happy to be dating, but you're happy that you're meeting some good people, and then
Right.
you find out they have all the qualities that you want, right? And then there's something that it's a big, not a red flag, a deal breaker. So like I was on a date. There was one guy I dated for like a few dates. Man, he was amazing. I mean, he ticked off everything, and he was a believer. That was the crazy thing. He was a believer, but then when we got into the granular, and thankfully this was by the third date. I think he was Greek Orthodox or something like that, but it was Greek Orthodox, which I think is Catholic, and I'm somewhere not over there. I was like Methodist, and so at the time, and so he was like, "No, you would have to convert to be married to me." And we weren't even talking marriage, but it was something granular as that. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I knew in my heart, I was like, I definitely am not converting, not because I don't love, we weren't at
That
a
I
love
wouldn't
stage,
love you,
but
but
yeah,
that's
but
changing
for
who
him,
you are. That's
yeah,
changing
yeah,
who you are at
yeah.
that point.
Yeah, so that one was like, I mean, thankfully we had that conversation closer to the beginning, but I can't imagine if we had kept on. He was someone I could have easily fallen in love with.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
sometimes, we don't have the conversation early enough, or we say, oh, well, we'll figure it out. It'll be okay. Like,
It'll be
and then
fine.
we
We'll
end
figure
up,
that out. It'll be
we'll
fine.
figure that out when the time comes. And like, no, I don't want you doing that either. And so a lot of times, like if I'm like working with a client, I mean, I keep their list of their values and non-negotiables with me, especially as we're
Yeah.
going, like, I talked to this person on the date and I'm like, where did he sit on this? Did you find out about this? Did you? Because they'll get distracted by this shiny,
Yeah,
he's
because
like,
he's really cute.
he's
Or
really
he's got a
cute. He
really
makes
good job.
yeah, he's in this case, sometimes we got retired and he has a house out in Colorado and he travels, they travel the world. And like, he wants to take me into his condo in New York City. I mean, that is
Yeah.
real stuff. And so, but then I have to look and like, well, have you talked about this yet? And, granted, I'm not talking about a first or second date. I mean, this is
Right,
normal when we're
right,
getting into the
right.
fourth or, and so then they're like, oh, and then the big one, oh, to the believers. So a lot of times a woman will be like, well, I want to date someone that's Christian. I'm like, okay, cool. And then, what does that mean? I have to ask them, what does that mean? I mean, because, that's, it's different for everyone. And then, someone's like, well, I'm not ready to have sex until we're married, right? Because, people are trying to make it right this time round. They're like, I'm going to do
Right.
all the things, or, or some people are like, well, I'm
I'm going to
Christian,
do
but
it
until
differently than I did before
I
because I'm going
know.
to do it different.
Yeah. And so one of the things that happens, if that's the case, like let's say they're like, no, I'm really committed to not being in a sexual relationship before marriage. I'm like, okay, great. Not a problem, great. We'll like move through that. And then a cute guy has a condo or whatever. They'll message, and this is usually in the initial stages. They'll be like, hey, can you send a picture of yourself? Like they'll get to the phone texting stage where they have each other's
Yeah.
numbers. Can you send pictures of yourself? Or I usually tell them like, those people are not your people. Like that is hands down. They probably are looking to date, but they're looking to have sex and date all before what you're ready for.
Yeah.
And they're like, what, really? And I'm like, yeah. And for me, I'm like, that's easy. Like then right away. But that actually is a lot on online dating. Is a lot of,
Yeah.
not just the profile pictures, but some guys will start sending pictures of themselves right away, and I'm like, no. Anyway, but those are easy to send off. That usually doesn't happen.
Sure.
that usually happens before a first date. But I was like, you don't even want to waste your time with that. Like, your energy is finite, and so we want to just be clear on, like, if that's not what you're looking for, great. If that's what you're looking for, like, I get women that are right out of a divorce, that's the only person they've ever had sex with, and they want to go and do all the things. I'm like, have at it. That's
Yeah.
no problem.
Well, because it's choices, but make sure you're making the choices for you and what is true to you, not what you think you should do, what somebody else wants you to do. Understand, I think, what feels right for you. Go with your gut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your gut never lies. It just doesn't.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, and then when we were younger, we ignored our gut. So learning, learning to listen to it. And a lot of women usually know, the ones that are in their 50s or 60s have a good sense. I mean, they still get distracted, about, with the shiny object syndrome. So with them, I just have to go back to your values. So if you're dating out, 50s or 60s, make your list of values, look at your non-negotiables, talk to your friend. Like, I met this guy, he seems really great, but there's this thing. And you also have to be clear that not everything is a red flag. So that is also the negative side on the dating, is that there's not a spark, right? So what you're talking about, the guppy date, we have to get them past that first date. And then not making anything they say or react to a red flag. So sometimes people get red flag happy, and then they're just like, there's no one out there. I'm like,
you think people get red flag happy because they don't necessarily want to be dating? They feel like they should be dating, and so everything that comes up is, oh, he likes to fish once a month, and I don't know if I can handle this, somebody out fishing once a month, or whatever it may be. You can get really I can see where you could get red flagged, just like you're trying to find whatever you can to make it not work.
Yeah, and that is and that usually those come off my divorces. Like, the people that have gone through a divorce, they're the ones that are more hyper independent and red flag, like trigger. There's more triggers involved. Less on the single moms and less on the widows, because they have a little bit, their mindset's a little bit open. And so usually I'll have to identify, like, what is it that you're afraid of, right? Now, there's
afraid of getting hurt again, probably. A lot of it is probably protection of the heart, right?
Oh, 100%. Protection. And and that's where I'll have to really investigate, when I'm coaching, when I see that, I'm like, okay, we cannot just have 10 terrible dates. And I don't believe in terrible dates. I think out of all the clients I have, I have one that there was really a terrible thing that happened. So I was like, I cannot believe that. I was so annoyed, but not at her. It wasn't her. It was the guy. And I was like, oh man. Thankfully she recovered. Thankfully she went back out there. But some people will have a terrible date, never go back out. But I think it's if you're going to go out onto the dating apps or Meetup or whatever, usually it's on the dating apps that, you have to really check your mindset and just really either have someone that's with you that's not agreeing with you, because a lot of times, we have our girlfriends that we go to and say, oh, let me tell you about the date I had, and then we'll pick it apart, but no one's questioning her experience, right? We're like, oh that guy was bad, and he was no good for you, and then there's no accountability, like, hey, what were you bringing to the table, or what were you thinking? So you want to have a friend that's at least neutral, or can ask you the right questions to see if it was a legit, you probably didn't want to talk to him anyway. So, and the thing about dating, especially 50s and 60s, or even 70s, my oldest client is 71, is that people are coming with their life experience. I don't want to call it baggage. We have life experience. We got decades.
Sure.
So I think if we hear something that's off, like, oh, they coming off 2 divorces or something, we want to start getting curious. Like, the first divorce could have happened at 21, and then the second one could have happened at 45, and now they're 60. So we don't want to just write someone off. And so part of dating is being curious. Oh, learning to be on a date, tell me more about that. Or if someone says, I fish every week or something. Like, what does that really entail? Or golfing, right? People golf, especially if
Yeah.
you're retired, or you don't even have to be retired, but like if your husband golfed all the time when you were married and they were gone Saturday and Sunday, well, in your mind, you're like, oh, I'll never marry another golfer. We would still need to investigate. Like, okay, so you like golf, but what does that really mean? Like, are you
Yeah.
going, like, are you
Yeah.
going Saturday and Sunday? And it might not mean anything. Maybe they go Saturday and Sunday, but you have a full life too that you'll get to meet somewhere during the week, you know. But learning to have open conversations where it's not yes, no. Tell me
Well,
more,
and I
go
think that's it.
on.
We
Yeah.
I think we have a hard time asking questions and having, we're afraid. I think we're afraid, and maybe this is a woman thing a lot of the time, is we're afraid of being perceived as being pushy or being um, over curious, even. But, and asking those questions like, all right, so you like to golf every weekend. That's cool. So what does that really look like? Tell me more about that. Who are you golfing with?
Yeah.
How much money do you spend on golf? Are you traveling to the greatest courses and leaving me at home? Or can I go with
Yeah.
you and I don't
Right.
want to golf, but I want to go over here and do this while you're golfing?
Yeah.
What do those
Yeah.
kinds of things look like in the day to day?
Yeah.
But I think
It's
we're
learning
afraid
to
to ask
ask.
those questions sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and getting like I mean, I'll just take your clip, but exactly what you said, what does that look like? Like learning to ask that and teaching hi, yeah, no problem. Sorry. Yeah, so just teaching other and this is for all your listeners is like when you start dating and this happens like even in the business world is like as we're meeting potential clients is we get them to open up and that's what you want your dates to be doing. You want them to open up about, man, you get to travel the world. you know I love when you said, all right, am I able to go? Yeah. And so
I
like or
mean,
how often.
and the thing is, at 20, we don't ask those questions, but at 60, those are the
Yeah.
questions I'm asking. I want to
Yeah.
know really where I fit into the scheme of things.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what's important. I think, again, people that find themselves out there dating, everybody, like you said, everybody's got life experiences. You know, they may
Yeah.
have adult children and grandkids. How involved, what does that look like, right?
Yeah.
I
Those
mean,
are
are your
all valid
grandkids
questions.
with you all day, every day? Because you're
Yeah.
watching them while your kids are at school or your kids are at
Yeah.
work or I mean, because every family situations, it's not mom, dad, and two kids, and then they go, and then grandma and grandpa, and you see them on Sunday at dinner. Family dynamics are completely different in 2025 than they were in 1995. Not even that long ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We're in
And
a
the dynamics
community.
are so
We're
different.
yeah.
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 And
We're
it's
it's very
really
community
important, I
based
think,
now.
and understanding how that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
it's okay to ask questions to get information that you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and to make decisions, and I think like being curious is the big thing. Grandparent, like being co-grandparenting or grandparenting, or you're the. I have one client who's like in the. She's dating someone that has grandkids. She doesn't have grandkids. Her and her husband, when she was married, she's a widow, never had kids. So we're in like different dynamic land with like, oh,
Sure,
there's kids
sure.
and grandkids and what that looks like. But I think the thing about it, as you're asking questions, I think when you're like, tell me what that looks like, in the first initial conversations, yeah, get as much information as you can. But don't cut someone off. I think this is the work that we all have to do, is people can change or they can change how they spend their time, right? Like, it's not just because, oh, it sounds like they have no time for me or they're always going to be with their grandkids. We want to make room for the adjustment, right? That there is a possibility
They,
that we can
they're
make.
always with their grandkids because they don't have a
Yeah,
significant
yeah,
other.
yeah,
So they're with the grandkids. Yeah, they need something to
yeah.
do.
Yeah. So I'm like, so I think that's the part where people forget. I mean, even when I was dating my husband, I was moving to Texas. I already knew I was moving back to Texas. And once I realized like we were going to get serious, like I had to ask him, hey, I'm moving.
By the
We
way,
can keep going. We can keep date. I was like, we can stop dating now. Just know I'm moving in 10 months. I think at the time it was 10 months that I was going to be moving. I was like, we can stop dating now, or we can keep seeing where this goes, because at this point we're at a juncture. And, he had this thought. He's like, I never considered Texas. The way he said it, I never considered Texas, but I'm willing to consider it. So it wasn't like we became exclusive at that one point, but it took him
right.
it took him probably another 6 months from that moment for us to solidify as a couple. Then he was willing to play it out. And I think that's what, me telling him, hey, this is what's up front, this is what's at stake, yes, we have to have those intentional conversations, but same thing with, grandkids, or we need to take care of my mom, she's in her 90s, like, hey, this is what's on my plate right now. It might not be that we get to hang out every time. I'm her only caretaker. I'm still getting help. Like, putting what's at stake, like, here's what I'm willing to do. But we need to not make the assumption. We need to
Right.
say, are they able to change, or am I able to change? Right? And usually that's the
Hope I
goal
lost you. I don't
of
know if you
like,
can hear me.
am I able to adjust? Because even when you bring someone in as a marriage or dating, I mean, you're creating space. Oh no. Shit.
See if she's gonna come back. Oh, see if she's gonna come back in. There you
Sorry about
are.
that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I was just about to text
But
you to see if you're going to be able to get back on. I'm like, she's got to be able to come back here in a minute.
yeah. Um, yeah, sorry about that. It just, the internet just went out, so my apologies.
Yeah,
I think it
that's
says
okay.
the echo is
That's what
not
editing
on.
is for.
Okay, yeah, I figured as much. I'm like, yeah, but my apologies.
That's
But
okay.
it
That's
doesn't let,
okay. But I think I'm hearing the echo again.
it says I can't change it because we're recording.
Oh, okay. Let's just have. I'll figure it out.
Did you
I'll
hear
worry
me?
about it. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think we're delayed now. Um, so I mean, let's just kind of let's start again. Let's because I will edit all this out. So if you had one thing to say to somebody that's listening that what would you whisper in her ear? If you were sitting next to her and she was thinking of getting back into the dating world and all those things, what would you whisper in her ear so that she knew?
That it's worth the effort to find the love of your life. It's right around the corner, and you just have to be willing to show up. It is worth the effort, it's worth the rejection, it's worth the awkward dates, it's worth the mundane, it's worth the energy. It is worth it when you find your person. So don't give up on yourself.
There it is. You know, I think that's it. Don't give up on yourself. Um, you know, your goals are out there. You can reach them, whatever they may be. And just, you know, loneliness is a real thing in our aging population. Loneliness and isolation is a real thing. They're saying that is it's the equivalent of smoking like, I don't know, 13 cigarettes a day or something. I mean, it is a physical uh, it's damaging physically is what
Yeah.
loneliness and isolation can do, and I think it's a big thing in our aging population. You get 60, 70, 80 years old, and it's not necessarily looking for a husband or a wife, but a companion, somebody to talk
Mm-hmm.
to, somebody you
Mm-hmm.
enjoy doing things with and going to the movies with or whatever that may be, is finding that companionship.
Yeah. And I would say is that they're looking for you too. They are looking for you too. And
I
that's what we
love
have
that.
to believe in. So, yeah.
I
At
love
any
that.
age.
At any age. So Leander, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you if they want to go to some of your seminars or your talks that you do. How do we reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website at Leandra Frey Coaching, and that's Frey. My Instagram at Frey Coaching. My next event is in person. It's McKinney. It's in McKinney, so you can find it on my website, and it's called Navigating Your Path to Love, Dating Q&A on May 7th from 6:30 to 8:30. It's a roundtable discussion on where you're at dating. Like, we have questions like, where do I start? How do I respond to this text? Which is the best dating app? I went on a date, now what? Anything, and if you're not even sure, you're like, I don't even know where to begin, then come. Like, so we have a mix of people that are there that have been dating, some that just started, some that are, they are almost taboo status. So they come and we have a good time and we laugh a lot, but we get really granular. Like, some of the craziest questions, we get really granular that you normally, you would hear for fodder, like in a dating story, but here, like, you're going to get a lot of strategy and mindset, but a lot of
Awesome.
strategy. So yeah, but yeah, and I usually put out. So I do that once a month. So that next one's May 7th, and the next one will be first Wednesday of June too. So yeah, it'll be fun.
I love it. Well, we'll put all that information, all your contact information, all that, of course, in the show notes. And I just want to thank you for sitting down and going through some of this. It's kind of when I met you and I learned what you do, I'm like, I need her on the show because we need to talk about this. Because, again, whether by choice or not, many people are finding themselves single in their 60s and 70s, and maybe they don't want to be.
Yeah.
And so this was it was a good, thoughtful way to look at, and strategically looking at dating.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's my
Because we ain't in
pleasure.
high school anymore.
It is
We
not
ain't in
high
high school
school.
anymore.
I mean, it would have been useful if we had some of these tools when we were younger, especially for some
No
of us
kidding.
that were divorced. We're like, this would have been great advice. As I told myself, I'm like, this probably would have saved me a load of heartbreak, but I'm grateful that I went through it because I have a good husband now. So I'm like grateful for my past self and my future self and my current self that I'm like, yeah, well, showed up. Like, just got to show up and believe. So yeah, it has been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I love it. I love it. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Relax, I Got This, Embracing Life After 60. Make sure you share this episode, like, subscribe, all the things so that we can continue to show people how you can embrace life after 60. We'll see you next time. Okay, so let's